Hello, everyone. I see people popping in and joining us as participants today to the CBI webinar. We love doing this every single month for you. I'm Sam Laprade. The Capacity Building Institute always invites really interesting guests to talk about various issues. So we look forward to the conversation today about networking and of course partnerships. Welcome everybody to the chat as well. I love seeing where everybody's coming from. It's a highlight for me every single month. So let me know where you're coming from today. I'm coming from a little bit of a different area than I normally am. I'm in Gatineau today, getting ready for a big event tonight. So I'm happy to be with all of you, but feel free to pop in to the chat where you're coming from today. And we'll get going as soon as we have a ton of people in the old room today, the virtual room, of course. You'll want to get caught up, of course, with the CBI every single month. They're putting out new content, and if you wanted to share about this webinar after and say to somebody, oh, you should watch this, don't worry. Hannah Rockborn make sure that she always records these, and Hannah will ensure that everybody has a chance to see it in the future again as well. We've got people coming in from beautiful British Columbia today, Robson Valley. Hello, John. And we've got our friends from Ottawa right across the bridge from me today, and beautiful Kingston as well. Thank you so much, Natushka, for joining us. And wonderful to have everybody here today. We've just waited maybe another minute and see if we can inspire some others to join us on this great chat today. And then we'll get started and we'll get right at it. Our good colleague Nick, of course, will spend some time talking about CBI to kick us off, and then we'll dive right into networking and partnerships. So maybe what I'll do is hand it over to the one and only Nick. Hi, Nick. How are you?
I'm great, Sam. How are you?
Great. I'll pass it over to you, and we'll see you in a minute.
Well, thank you. I'll see you soon. All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Nicholas Kuchme, and I am a Sustainable Development Engagement Intern at CBI. Now, CBI is a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing training, coaching, and mentorship support to staff and volunteers in the environmental nonprofit sector across Canada. We're a member of Sustainable Capacity Solutions collection of 5 nonprofits who are each committed to providing the capacity building needs that these small ENGOs need. Now, CBI's mission in particular is to provide the equal opportunity and access to capacity building training for every small shop, nonprofit environmental leader across Canada. This comes in the form of essential training and coaching for these leaders through expert courses and programs catered to various positions and responsibilities in the nonprofit sector. Now, we focus on 6 core areas to build capacity, as you can see in the slide. The goal is to equip them with the skills needed to lead their organizations effectively and make a lasting impact. Now, CBI facilitates numerous programs. These webinars, for example. Now, these webinars are held on the 4th Wednesday of every month. In addition, we have other programs. Last year, we brought seasoned leaders together with environmental nonprofits in the Ottawa area. This program matched people with over 20 years of experience to organizations in need of board members. Our intern training program is delivered with our partner, Eco Internships. It's designed to support youth who are starting their careers in the environmental nonprofit sector. Check out the website at ecointernships.ca and apply now. Now, our Capacity Building Certificate program is accepting applications for our 2024 cohort. The CBCP is a hands-on capacity building bootcamp for environmental leaders focused on key areas to help your nonprofit thrive. With this, you can ensure you have the practical tools, knowledge, and skills you need for successful nonprofit management, delivered by experts who are passionate about environmental work. The CBCP is delivered virtually, offering a combination of teaching materials, live group sessions, and one-on-one coaching. Now, if you join this webinar want to learn about networks and partnerships, it may interest you to know that Samuel Benoit, Executive Director of Velo Canada Bikes, expressed how the CBC connected him with a group of like-minded leaders of environmental nonprofits. This is one of the many benefits of the program. Now, you can learn more and apply now at capacitybuilding.ca. Now, to make sure you're getting the best of the best, we have a team of amazing lead trainers: Sam Laprade, Rob Barnes, Barb King, and Alex Keenan. You might notice, hey, is that the same STAD that's hosting the webinar today? In fact, it is. And she'll be hosting all our future webinars for 2024. I'd also like to thank all our sponsors and funders, including the Ottawa Community Foundation, the Sustainable Capacity Foundation, and the City of Ottawa. Without their help, none of this would be possible. Now, as a reminder, I'd like to encourage you to reach out to us with any questions or insights you might have, or if you just want to learn more. As I said before, we're looking for people in leadership roles at environmental nonprofits to join our Capacity Building Certificate program. Now, our next webinar will be held on March 27th, 2024 from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. We have Dwayne Taylor from newpack.co joining us for that day to talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion. Be sure to sign up to our newsletter to stay up to date on the next webinar and more at capacitybuilding.ca. Now, thank you all for being here, and I will leave you to enjoy the webinar.
Thanks so much, Nick. Appreciate that a warm welcome and that explanation of everything goes on with CBI, which is wonderful. It's my pleasure to introduce you today to Danya Pastuszek. Hi, Danya. How are you?
Doing great, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you here, and Co-Chief Executive Officer for Tamarack Institute. First of all, tell us about Tamarack. Give us a sense of what you're up to.
So Tamarack, thank you for asking, is a network of communities. We are all over Canada, really all over the world, and really united in our really, really deep belief that local communities hold the experience and hold the expertise and hold the imagination necessary to address their community's most promising opportunities. So communities we work with are doing things like drastically reducing the rates of poverty in the cities and neighborhoods and regions where they work. They are implementing plans for just climate transitions and for climate adaptation, with residents really at the center of the work. They're realizing the epidemic of loneliness that we're seeing just around the world and around Turtle Island these days, and doing work to really reduce the impacts of loneliness and the extent of loneliness. So we are all about local, we are all about place, we are all about the power of people who bring their skills together to create great things for their places.
Wow, that was fantastic. Incredibly inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing. And co-chief executive officer, I have to ask about that because we're talking about networks and partnerships today. That's a key partnership, right? Being a co-executive executive at a level like that.
Tamarack has really been founded on the idea of shared leadership, like you mentioned. And one way that we do that is through the executive leadership model. So the idea is really that it's new. It can be a bit, I heard the term countercultural recently, and I've been playing with that, but it can be a bit countercultural. It can be a bit new to really embrace in the clarity of how decisions are going to be made and the clarity of who makes decisions, and then the work of making decisions that matter collectively. So the idea of the co-CEO model is that we really believe that communities are best able to achieve transformational change when they work in collaboration. Let's model that within our organizational structure. And so Tamarack has had a co-CEO model as part of modeling that collaborative approach for 7 years now. My predecessor and our founder and our current co-CEO, Liz Weaver, were the initial co-CEOs. And now Liz and I have been at it for the last 2 years on the day, actually.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. That's great. That's wonderful. And it's really interesting, when we think about, networking and partnerships, I can't think of an organization, whether it's, an environmental organization, any organization, quite frankly, that can work in a silo anymore. Those days are over, right, Danya?
I think those days are over, and perhaps those days were never upon us. As I really become and try to be a student of history, and I look at the ways that the Indigenous peoples who have stewarded these lands for so long, when I look at the ways that my ancestors in Poland and Ukraine lived in thousands of years ago. We've always, many of us, lived in places and structures of society where the idea of the commons and the idea of the collective was essential. And so perhaps those days of working in silos never worked very well, but it certainly seems right now, like given the massive both polycrises upon us, and then as my friend and partner Louise Adongo in Nova Scotia described earlier today, the poly opportunities and the poly responses that are upon us. I agree with you. It really does feel like we are in a moment where we need to be thinking about seeing where the silos are, seeing what we're each doing individually to uphold them, trying not to do those things anymore, and really embracing all the things that are necessary to work in higher collaboration.
Yeah, beautifully said. There's a term, place-based partnership. What is this?
Mm-hmm. So I think that everyone here probably knows intuitively what a place-based partnership is, because in some ways we're all sort of part of them. But when we think about place-based partnerships, we first think about them in terms of what are they really meant to achieve? What's their why? So the why of a place-based partnership is that there is an outcome, or there is an equity gap in a place, and there are outcomes and there are equity gaps in all places because of how we've structured our systems, that the community has a desire to work on. And so the first feature of a place-based partnership is here's an opportunity, here's an equity gap, here's the geography, whether it's a neighborhood or a city or a region, and there's a group of people that care enough to get together to do something about it. The second thing that's true about place-based partnerships that defines them is that there are people who have come together who represent diverse talents, diverse perspectives, diverse experiences. They're from many generations, they're from all sectors. They always include residents and really design themselves to be structured around the wisdom of residents who are being most harmed by the current conditions that the partnership is trying to address. The third thing I'd say about these place-based partnerships is that they're really committed to process. Process, like I said, to center lived experience, process to design innovative collaborative governance structures and community agreements and ways of working that feel really fun and that generate feelings of belonging for the people that are involved. They have processes that really seek to understand and harness local assets. They have processes that seek to co-design plans that aren't just about a particular siloed strategy, but are about a whole suite of strategies that work together. And they have process that really enables a group to try to embrace complexity, try to embrace emergence, and try to embrace the real value of relationships and doing their work.
And so much of what you just said, when I think about climate change and the work that's being done, really aligns in terms of, but in terms of climate justice, as you put it, in terms of climate change, walk us through a little bit about how these link.
I wanted to share before, it's interesting, if you're in Gatineau, you and I are both on Algonquin Anishinaabe lands.
I was thinking
every
that
time we drive the more than 200 kilometers, I just think of the vastness of that land.
Beautiful.
And I hold gratefulness for all the Indigenous people who have stewarded these lands for so long. And I think about the responsibility, that I have as a settler living on these lands, which are still unceded. So wanted to say that I feel that connection to you because of our shared rain and then our shared connection on these lands right now.
Thank you, Danya.
Much of the early work that communities that Tamarack has worked with did was around economic poverty. And this hypothesis that if you bring groups together to really focus on an outcome, understand the complex root causes of why we haven't gotten to that outcome, and do things together with the real iterative, emergent and innovative approach, that could do things like really reduce levels of poverty. The theory played out. And so over the last several years, Tamarack has worked to build out networks focused in other areas, all of which is just to say that one of the most recent things we've been doing is supporting over 60 communities now, many of which are Francophone communities in Canada, to work on just climate transitions. And we find many things, of course. One of the things we find is that municipalities actually have shown a lot of leadership in the development of local climate and local adaptation plans, and we're exceptionally grateful for that, and appreciate the leadership of local government leaders. What is sometimes true is that because of resourcing or other factors, residents and community groups and activists and businesses aren't always brought into that planning. And so one way that we see the connection between climate justice and place-based partnerships is that if there is a group of people in a place that cares deeply about an aspect of climate adaptation or mitigation, a group can come together that's not just a municipality or not just a business that wants to reform its own internal practices to reduce harm to the environment and other living things, but really that you can bring together a group of people to work around climate in particular. So among these 60 communities that we have the joy to work with, some of them focus on things like ensuring that in the case of the Finger Lakes, New York, there is a system of measurement in the community. That system in the past has not included any indicators around climate resiliency. And now, because of the work of this cross-sector partnership, the county and the local foundations and all the actors that are looking at the community dashboard are now looking at a set of climate indicators as well. In the regional district of the Kootenays in BC, the connection between place-based partnerships and climate has been that there is an emerging transportation plan for parts of the regional municipality, really built on the wisdom of residents. And there's new narratives and communication tools available to help people who have different perceptions of what causes changes in our climate and different perceptions around what the solutions should be and who should be responsible for them, to maybe learn a bit more, or at least to be able to stay in the same conversations with each other, regardless of what they might believe.
And it's so interesting because I'm listening to you and I'm thinking you almost make it sound really easy. And I know it's hard work to bring all these different people to the table and create these partnerships. And give me some advice for the resiliency it takes to not give up. And when I think about getting municipal leaders and elected officials to agree to things, that's difficult work sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd love your thought on this question too, and others in the room, because it is sort of the key question some days, it seems to me. Maybe I'll share 3 things for now. One is that we just have to hold an expectation for the length of time it's going to take. I've been doing partnership building work officially for 13 years now. And in the local partnership that I worked before coming to Tamarack, they've been at the work for over a decade, and results are starting to change at the scale of the entire community. But it's taken 10 years to build the trust across the partners that allows people to really understand what the real problems are, and then to stop doing what they are doing that's not producing the type or the extent of the change that they want, and to start doing the things that might produce that change, and then to kind of step back and try a different direction when that exact combination of things doesn't work, and then to step back and try again when the local administration changes and there's sort of new players at the table. I just think expectation around the length of time that it takes and pacing that's appropriate to the energy and the capacity of the group is really important. Yeah. The second thing I would say, I'll pause, Sam.
Yeah, no, you go ahead. It's very interesting. Go.
The second thing I would say is that I think that really holding the outcome that the group together is capable of achieving is a way to build resilience. I don't know if others in this room right now also grew up in nonprofits, but I grew up working in nonprofit organizations, and it was taught to me so well that my loyalty should be to my organizational mission and vision. And the thing about resilience in partnerships, I find, is yes, it's partly about my belief and my commitment to my organizational mission, but it's also about in the case of climate, the climate equity goal that the group has set. And that's a goal that I can't achieve on my own. That's a goal that might not have a direct connection to the day-to-day work I'm doing, in my day job. That's a goal that is often hard to kind of believe every day is really possible, but really holding that belief in that goal and challenging ourselves or encouraging ourselves to really be imaginative about what it might take to get there, I think is the second thing I've learned. And the third thing is just to get to know the people that you're working with. Many people are amazing, and when we really take the time to build relationships and get to know each other as full people, the work can be really fun. I was with young people in Ottawa a couple of weeks ago. We support 20 youth-led collective impact partnerships. And one of the young people told me that it takes 100 cups of tea to get to know someone. And I could talk for an hour about what I've sort of learned as I've thought about that wisdom. But it does. It takes time to get to know someone. And once we put in that time, those relationships and that love that we can build with people, I find can really build a lot of resilience to stay in the partnership work.
Can we consider this to be our first cup of tea?
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think this is an opportunity as well to, when we think about networking and partnerships, and we think about, and you said it so beautifully at the end there about relationship building and the patience that takes. There's a lot of people that think, but we don't have that kind of time. The climate's changing every day. Look what's happening. It's February the 28th and it's lightning out, and it's, where's their winter? And, some people don't feel like they've got that kind of patience. What advice would you give them?
Yeah. I'm so glad you asked that. I'm just pulling the name up of an organization I really want to mention. I was reintroduced a couple of weeks ago to a framework called 3 Horizons Thinking, and I'm not an expert in it. So if people on this call are, please, when we get into conversation, help me give a more robust overview of it. But what I take from it is at any moment of time, if we're doing the kind of work that we all do, there is work that is literally about transforming the systems that govern every aspect of our lives right now that we're so sort of enmeshed in that we can't even fully see sometimes, especially if our identities give us privilege within those systems. Mm-hmm. There's also first horizon thinking, the reality that, I'm sitting here and all of our snow has melted because it's been 7 degrees all day long, and it's the 28th of February. It's the 28th of February. And parts of British Columbia are on fire. I mean, they're to your point, I don't mean to share things that are hard to hear that we all know, but my point is just that we have to address both horizons at the same time. And I think partnerships are really well equipped to do that. I was speaking with a partner in British Columbia yesterday, and at the same time that they are working on training young people to move into emergency management, which is sort of second horizon thinking. They are also thinking about how can they build the relationships between current government leaders and Indigenous elders and knowledge keepers to really get to some of those third horizon approaches. They're also thinking about what are going to be the emergency preparedness approaches that will ensure that people across this country who are going to live the impacts of flooding and fires and other forms of extreme weather patterns over the course of the year have what they need to be resilient in the face of those disasters. They're doing work to make sure that everyone is aware that climate change is not impacting all of us in the same way. People, Indigenous people, because of the systems that we've built, are far more likely to experience the negative impacts of climate change, far more likely to live in areas that are going to experience more extreme weather patterns. And so that sort of education I just offer as another example of First Horizons work. And really my point is just that we have to do all 3 things at once. And to your point on silos, when we can work together, I found we have a better chance of working on all 3 of those horizons at the same time.
Yeah, wonderfully said. This is going to be kind of an interesting question. I'm anxious to hear what your thoughts are. How do we know that someone's going to be a good partner? I relate it almost. I collect husbands, so let's just lay it on this line. So I'm not an expert by any stretch, but I do think about it almost like a relationship, a personal relationship, because so much has to be aligned: values, obviously, but even the way you think about money, the way you think about time, how quickly organizations would want to move, and everything in between, when there is hard times and when a pandemic hits, and how do we know what partner would be a good partner, and is there any way to really know that until you're in there together?
Yeah. Well, I think there's things that you can look for. There's conditions that you can build, and there's always the answer to the question of what can I do? What is within my control to do? So let me just say a little bit about that. I think that the quality of self-reflection and self-awareness is really critically important. I already referenced this song, but Stevie Wonder is on my mind today. And there's a song called "So," in which Stevie Wonder sings about how we're all of systems and in systems. And it's a beautiful song, and his rendition of the words is much more powerful than mine. So I really encourage a listen. But I think about that song a lot because I don't think you can be your best version of a partner if you're not self-reflective about your own gifts, your own strengths, what you love about yourself, what you can bring uniquely. If you're not confident in that set of beliefs, if you're not trying to also understand where you might be causing harm that you don't intend, if you don't understand, aren't trying to understand your complicity in systems that aren't producing the results you're after, I think it can be hard to be a good partner. So really looking for that cue that someone is self-reflective, I think is one piece. I talk a lot about results and belief in what's possible. I think that's another attribute to look for. Openness and vulnerability and humility, and the ability to think about what is the role that I need to hold, particularly if I'm in a position of power. What are the kinds of roles that I might often be asked to hold, but really shouldn't be mine to hold, because people who are a little bit closer to the issue should hold that role instead. So all of that, I think, is helpful. There's been some amazing work done around kind of competencies of people participating in partnerships that I'd be glad to share after, for folks that want more information on that. In terms of what can be built, though, I think a lot can be built. We spoke a little bit early about collaborative governance and collaborative leadership structures. You and I sitting down and asking each other questions about what do our agreements to one another need to look like? If we disagree with one another, how do we want to raise that? If, Danya, you harm me in some way and I feel like I can't move into our 15th cup of tea unless I'm able to say this to you, how can I say that to you? If you make a commitment to me, how are we going to hold ourselves accountable or create a system where, you feel accountable to following through on that commitment? Having conversations like that, I find really can create the conditions for good partnership, because everyone is able to weigh in on what the partnership will look like. And people feel often excited, or at least responsible for those commitments because they've helped to generate them together. And the last thing I'll just say is, I think as with a marriage as well, many marriages anyway, there's a gradual movement into partnership. The initial partnership that I might have with someone might not look like, creating a shared program together. It might look like sharing some learnings with one another. Then it might look like, attending some events together to see if what we're seeing, seems complementary. And then it might look like this and this and this. And the co-creation of the program that we each bring different assets into doesn't come until a little bit down the line. So I think back to the idea around spaciousness and time, we have to give partnership time. And good partners can emerge, but you may not see that on cup of tea date one. It may not be until much later. And in communities that have been at the end of a lot of extraction, I think it's particularly important to go slow with partnership and to develop something that is going to make sense and be restorative and reciprocal and meaningful for all the partners involved.
Where were you 25 years ago when I really needed you, Danya? I needed all this great information back then. Let me ask you this. A topic I love talking about, of course, is philanthropy. Where do philanthropists fit into this in your mind?
Yeah. We see so many philanthropists actually participating in local partnership work. I think that's a really important way for philanthropists to show up. You know, there's a lot of really important conversations happening right now about the role of philanthropy. So we can talk about the kind of granting role of philanthropy in a moment, but I really want to start with the fact that there is really a seat at the table for philanthropists when it comes to local place-based approaches. The seat is not to make the decisions around what the partnership should be doing. The seat is not to receive information from residents that are being impacted by climate change and then to decide what to do with it. But the role is to listen and to learn and to adapt, you know, their own approaches to grant making and to being in relationship with partners in their communities as a result of what they hear. Their result can be to network local partners and residents to other people that they might be able to learn from or do something powerful together. The role might be to convene a group of people who might not otherwise come to the conversation, or to bring in people who would only come because of the positionality that they as philanthropists have. So I really do see the role of every actor in a community as being not a singular role, but there's a multitude of roles that the evidence would show, and has been my experience, really can do a lot to advance local outcomes in a transformative way. You know, again, there's a lot being written by people more knowledgeable about me right now about the role of philanthropy when it comes to funding. But I'll echo what I think is becoming an increasingly common conversation, which is that it's very powerful when philanthropists can give less restricted dollars, when they can give it over time, when they can give it to organizations that may not have charitable and nonprofit status. Transformative change takes time, and we can't always see all the changes that are going to occur at the start of a project. So when we have the ability to have some of what we do emerge, it really can create a powerful reason to partners to work together, to actually take those pauses, to learn and to iterate, and to try some new things and to take some risks. When money can be long-term as opposed to single or multiple year, there's a lot more spaciousness to do something transformative as opposed to more project-based. You know, when the funding can be in amounts that are sufficient for a group or for an organization to do the entirety of their work, it frees them up to use their imagination to think about the work and the relationships that fuel the work, as opposed to spending their time on funding the work.
Honestly, just as you're talking, I'm thinking about all the times I sat at my dining room table thinking about applying for a grant that was maybe $5,000 or $10,000, and thinking, even if we got this grant, it's going to cost us $5,000 or $10,000 to report back on it, and to, you know, to use program people's time to you know, collect the data. Not that I don't want to be accountable for the money, but you know, and not that I'm not grateful for $5,000 or $10,000, but at the end of the day, thinking about that balance of philanthropy doing good and not just for the sake of giving money away, to be honest. That makes sense to you?
It does. And you know, you make me think as well, there's some very powerful work that I see happening where philanthropists are thinking together about what could be their collective impact. So when I see funders working together to reduce those reporting requirements on their $5,000 grants that you mentioned, when I see funders pooling funding, like the way that I think one of your funders that Nick showed earlier has, to create to de-risk some opportunities for the funders and allow them to put money toward community efforts that they might not have been able to otherwise. That is very powerful. I think, you know, all of us should be thinking about alignments. You know, at Tamarack, we hold ourselves accountable for that as well, thinking about with other national intermediaries and field builders and capability builders, how are we working together to create a supportive infrastructure for communities? When funders do that work as well, that's very powerful, because even the largest funder in our country does not have the resources on their own to achieve the amount of transportation that I think many of us and an increasing number of us really know is possible.
Yeah, beautifully said. I've been getting to ask all the great questions. We're going to open it up in a couple of minutes for our attendees to ask some great questions too. So don't forget to share that in the Q&A. You can find that top or bottom or side, depending on how you have your slide set up today. But great opportunity there for you to ask any questions. I love asking this question. Hannah knows I'm going to ask it. Resources, books, videos, all those great things that you can point us to. Is there anywhere you're sending us today, Danya?
That is a great question. Again, one I would love to know the group's wisdom on as well. Okay, I'll do a couple of each. I've been reading a lot these days about social infrastructure and connection. And it really goes back to your question, Sam, around what makes a good partner. Partnership work, place-based collaboration, really rests upon a set of relationships and a belief that people have that those relationships aren't just nice to have and aren't just good for us interpersonally, but really are at the roots of systems change. And so one book I would really recommend, it's been around for a couple of years, but it's called Palaces for the People. And I love it because it speaks to the intersections between social connection and climates. And it tells really powerful stories of the ways that social connection and climate and poverty come together in local libraries, on basketball courts, in neighborhoods, in ways that do things like, reduce the death rate for older isolated people during extreme weather events. So that one I'm loving. Someone who I deeply respect in the climate space recommended A Paradise Built in Hell to me last year, which may be very familiar to many in your audience here. But I've really appreciated the practically hopeful thoughts that it has as it offers examples of communities that have come together after climate-related disasters. I would say, I apologize if this sounds self-promotional, but some of the communities that we work with and some of my colleagues worked last year on a guide called A Guide to Building Sustainable and Resilient Communities. And I've actually printed it out, even though I try not to print things, but it feels well worth it. I've thumbed through it so many times that you can tell I use it often. It's full of self-assessments and really practical tools and really inspiring stories of communities that have not just built partnerships, but to your point, Sam, sustained those partnerships for the long term. Yeah.
Anything else you can think of that you want to share in terms of resources? Is there any, I just think a TED Talk, but is there any videos, anything like that you may want to send us to as well?
You had mentioned your YouTube channel when we were first talking. And so tons of good stuff on there. And then I'll offer as well that SETC, run by Victor Beausoleil and the team, has an amazing set of interviews on their website as well. And I love a good TED Talk, but I also love a good local leader from Turtle Island talking about what drives them and referencing places and people and organizations and stories that we might all well know. So it's just beautiful people in really exciting and energizing conversation. So I'd recommend all the content on there. And then I should probably also say, because this is how we met one another, the 60 communities that I mentioned that Tamarack has the opportunity to work with that are working on community climate transitions really are doing amazing work. So we have a website listing some of their stories. We'll be releasing an impact report with learnings from the communities that we've worked with over these first 2 years. And I'll definitely direct you toward that when it comes out. But check out that page on our website, because if you're interested in case studies of communities that are doing work that is related to climate equity, that's another place full of good reads as well.
It's fantastic. We put out the call for some great questions, and one's already come in, and it's such a lovely one. Jacqueline writes, thanks for this rich conversation. Thank you so much for that comment, Jacqueline. Here's her question. Do you have any advice on how to pass along partner relationships during a leadership transition? Such a great question. Jacqueline, Danya, over to you.
That is such a great question. Advice on how to transfer relationships during a leadership transition. So first, I would say something that I learned early in my career that I actually listened to, because I think I was offered a lot of things early in my career that I didn't listen to. The one thing I listened to was that relationships, when they're held not just by one person, but by multiple people in an organization, that can do a lot to, to cushion things when leaders move on. And so that's what I would say first. Try not to hold one relationship just to yourself, but really bring others into it as well, for the sake of the relationship development. And then also because sometimes the generative thinking you can do with a partner goes even better if you can have self-awareness about where you might be strong, but also where you might have a colleague who is strong in a different place. That's the first thing I would say. Kind of don't partner just with one person. Try to develop multiple partners. I would say that back to the idea of building systems that enable good partnerships and good partners, asking the questions along the way of how are we going to be capturing knowledge and capturing wisdom as we go, so that when people leave, because people will leave, and the rates of departure from nonprofits and potentially other sectors as well is higher these last couple of years than it has been in a long time. So the leaving is going to happen. We need to plan for it. So building in the knowledge management approaches where information is being captured in different ways, so that when people leave, they don't bring all of their knowledge with them, I find very helpful. I've experimented recently with the idea of stay interviews and exit interviews. This is something that I learned actually from colleagues who do kind of people management work within organizations, but it works really well in cross-sector partnerships as well. Every couple of months, go have that cup of tea and have an honest conversation about what's working in the partnership. How could we make it better together? How are you doing? Maybe that reveals something about whether or not they might be in their position long-term. And then at the end, before someone leaves the role, having an opportunity again to say goodbye in a good way, and to find out from them if there's someone else that the relationship could be transferred into. The last thing I'll say is a hard earned lesson that I think I've learned a few times and hopefully won't have to learn again. But I do a lot of reflection about what actually has to get written down. And I think I was brought up in a culture where there really was too much worship of the written word, too much adherence kind of play to what was written down over different types of experiences and different ways of holding knowledge. At the same time, I think there are points in commitment to one another where codifying things in some way can be really helpful, so that when people move along, the key commitments or the key assets that people are bringing into a partnership are there and are remembered. I think doing those in ways that are collective, that everyone in the partnership can see, can be really powerful as well, as opposed to just the kind of person to person or organization to organization understandings.
No, for sure. Another question that I love to ask, because I just never know what the answer is going to be, which is always exciting for me. I love to bust myths. So what's a myth, do you think, about partnerships that that people have kind of held on to this belief, but it's really not that way? Because I think things have changed, certainly.
Yeah. I find myself wanting to get your answers to all these questions. I'll go with this one. I think in the early stages of collective impact, back in the early 2010s, I experienced a ton of excitement about this new approach. It actually wasn't new. As I mentioned before, I think, you know, collaboration is really ingrained in all of us and has been around for a really long time. But I think the introduction of the article, the excitement that it built, generated a really deep belief that place-based partnership could achieve really broad outcomes. And I think that's a myth. Really, to get to the scale of transformation that we need, place-based partnership around climate equity or anything else is essential, but it's not sufficient. We also need the systems changes at the level of, you know, how international trade and industry is organized. We need change at the level, you know, nationally and internationally about what gets funded, and 1,000 things in between each of those layers. There's no one approach to social change that's going to get us to climate equity. So I think it's a myth to think that place-based partnerships on their own can do it. And because we've been, you know, some people have heard that myth over these last several years, there's a bit of a questioning now about the role of local collaboration, but not because it doesn't work, because it works when it's in concert with several other approaches to social change as well. That's one myth that I think needs busting.
And you know, I'm really obviously a very positive person, but I have to ask you this: when do you know if a partnership is over? That it, you know, I've often believed in the scenario, you know, you're together for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. How do you know that that reason has come to an end, or that season is complete? How do you know that when maybe the time is right to have that honest conversation, that cup of tea, and sit down and say, I think we're going to go our separate ways?
I think back to setting things up from the beginning, having that conversation at the beginning. How will we know when this is done? How do we think right now we'll know this is done? Is really important to maintain the relationship, and for lots of other reasons as well. But you know, I'm working in a partnership right now with a group of people who I know well. Their idea, however, is very emergent, and you know, we've agreed we're going to commit initially to this partnership for 9 months because the idea is emergent, and maybe the thing that you need from Tamarack right now is not going to be the thing that you're looking for 9 months from now. And so let's not lock ourselves into something based on like a context that's very dynamic right now. So I think you know, setting expectations for when you'll look back is one thing I've learned. Having some sort of interim goals that once you reach them, you know, you consider having the partnership dissolve. Some of the work that we've done at Tamarack around reconciliation, racial equity, and belonging within our network and organization, we've organized around ad hoc committees, not because the work isn't ongoing, but because the different stages in our process change. And so setting partnerships up sometimes to have a specific focus, and then to either reconsider if they stay together or to disconvene is another thing I've learned. And then, you know, I think anytime you start to see people walking away from a partnership, it's the moment to think about why. Every time I have the courage and the vulnerability to ask people why we started with the room of 40 people and now we have 12 people, every time I have the vulnerability to figure out how to ask those questions, you learn a ton about what that partnership feels like to the people who are in the room, in ways that can help you sustain the partnership if needed, and completely transform or to hospice the partnership if it's not a place that's building the kind of belonging and social cohesion and sense of progress that is really necessary if people are going to stay in partnerships.
Yeah, really interesting perspective there. Julian's asking a great question as well. In cross-sector relations, how do you navigate different leadership styles? And the examples here are boss, leader.
Love this. Love this. I think one thing I'll say, I just wrote a short blog about this because it was such a powerful realization for me. But understanding what people have as their daily experiences and what people mean when they say certain words is really critically important. I work, I'm doing a project with an amazing academic right now. The more I get to know this academic, the more I realize our daily experiences are just so different. And it's interesting because we're both working with youth, but just in very different contexts in different ways. And when it clicked for me a couple of weeks ago, just how very different our daily experiences are, I was able to start to relate to this person in a different way because I was able to ask better questions about what they meant when they said something and better able to define what I meant when I said certain things. So I think definitions and understanding people's experiences and what interests they have in the partnerships is one way of navigating it. The other thing I would say doesn't always work. And it works for a while, and then I find it doesn't work, and then it might work again. But I do think we have to do it even though it doesn't work consistently. And it's being able to set aside the role that you hold in your professional life when you go into a partnership. So, I'm in a position where I hold a lot of different, we all hold power. I hold a lot of different types of power. I hold a lot of positional authority. When I go into partnerships, sometimes I go in, with my title, but sometimes I go in and I'm the facilitator. Sometimes I go in and I'm there in a listening mode. Sometimes I go in and I'm there to chart on the chart board because someone needs to hold that role. But really trying to recognize what is your role when you go into the room, and to recognize that it may not be the role that you hold when you're outside of the room, I think is critically important. And then perhaps part of what I'm reading into the question is there's ongoing conversations that I think we can all have with the people that we know best about how to be a leader, not a boss, how to see that leading is a verb and that we all can lead. We all have assets and gifts and experiences that are required and that call us to lead at different moments. But that the boss style of leadership when you're doing partnership work is helpful at certain points. It is very helpful at certain points, but is not it's not sometimes the way to show up if what you're after is surfacing the best ideas and really valuing that there are different types of experience that need to be uplifted and celebrated and brought into decision making.
For sure. Yeah, such great questions today. We had Jacqueline and Julian submit those questions, and very, very valuable perspectives there. Just going to see what else we have in our question and answer area. This is from John. I believe John is coming to us from beautiful British Columbia. Dana, do you have any thoughts about the care and feeding of the grassroots recruitment and retention and motivations, also earned media? Danya, any question? Sorry, go ahead.
You read it one more time, Sam. It's a great question.
It says, Danya, do you have any thoughts about the care and feeding of the grassroots and motivations, also earned media, and in brackets for grassroots recruitment and retention? We have about 3 or 4 minutes left.
So it's thank you, John, for the question. There's 3 questions in there, if I'm understanding correctly. So I'll try to grab all of them. In terms of feeding the grassroots efforts, we need more resources for grassroots efforts, and I'm excited about the conversation that I hear on Turtle Island about making financial and other resources more accessible for people doing grassroots work. We need that work not just because it is often the experience that's closest to the problems and therefore the possible solutions, but also because there's a positionality sometimes that grassroots leaders can take that people trying to affect change already working in government or already elected to government can't do, and that grassroots leaders can lovingly push them into doing. It's absolutely a critical role, and we need to nurture it financially. We need to uplift the examples of where it is sparking real change, and we need to celebrate and nurture the leaders that are doing that work. We try very hard within the partnerships that we work in to always have, if not grassroots leaders present in partnerships from the start, a pathway to create a partnership in which it would be joyful and meaningful for grassroots leaders to participate. So I think we need more of that as well.
Mhm.
In terms of retention of people in this work, I think we need to keep lovingly pressing for the compensation for this work to reflect the value of this work. There is some reports being put out by the Schwab Foundation for Social Innovation right now that are really looking at the role of social innovation. We're all social innovators here in the way that they define it very broadly. The role of that sector in terms of our economies and in terms of the information and knowledge that businesses and government need if we're going to move into the future. So I think continuing to work together to really raise the profile and raise the compensation for people doing this work is essential. And the last thing I would offer is just that in my experience, the work of partnership can actually be a way of advancement and retention for people. I don't know if any of you have ever been in organizations where you didn't quite feel, heard, seen, or like you belonged. But my experience has been when I can find the partnership spaces where I do feel heard, seen, and like I belong, that can be the antidote to maybe a place where I might spend some of my time where I don't feel that way. So I do think that part of retention really is helping people to find their places in partnerships where they can have an impact and a set of relationships that are profound.
Yeah, beautifully said. Earlier, we got that great question from Julian, and he's coming to us from Wellington, New Zealand today. So I just have to give a big shout out to Julian for joining us. I don't even know what the time is there, so that's impressive. I think it's pretty early in the morning. Thank you so much, Danya. I've learned so much from you today, and you've got such a beautiful energy, and I really appreciate you. Were just what I needed today. I learned a lot from you, and I feel that our participants and our attendees as well have learned a lot. So thank you so much for everything you've brought to us today, and you've got me thinking about those 100 cups of tea as well. So and so much more. So thank you very much for spending time with us.
Thank you, and to everyone who I can't see but I know is there. Just thank you for what you do. Keep at it. We see you. You make me feel like part of a community. And now is our moment. The world needs us, and I can see the future, and it's good.
Oh, beautifully said. And a big shout out, of course, for Capacity Building Institute. Thank you so much for this opportunity today, to Hannah and Nick, the whole team that does all that behind the scenes work and just makes us look great, Danya. We look fantastic. It's great. They've got us all organized and ready to go. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you in March, everyone. Very important discussion happening in March, and I know you'll want to be here. Tell your friends as well. I'm Sam Laprade, representing the Capacity Building Institute so proudly today. Thank you so much, and have a great day, everyone.